I want to thank our sponsor, Planet Ford. Planet Ford has always been a proud supporter of law enforcement in the community, providing customer service and fleet management, sales, and service. If you're looking for that personal quality service, contact Planet Ford in Spring or online at planetford.com. You're listening to Crime Scene Today, where we talk about current and future issues affecting law enforcement, forensics, and crime scene investigation. I'm your host, Dan Zintek. Joining me today, I have the police chief of Humble Police Department, Ken Theis, and I appreciate you coming in today. We're going to be talking about other police topics, but actually this week and the following week, we have two police chiefs that have just recently been promoted to chief. Ken with Humble, and then Montgomery ISD police chief. He just recently took that role. So this week we're going to be talking about the city of Humble and just some goals and different things they're doing and news around the world affecting law enforcement. And then next week we're going to be talking about school resource officers, the importance and the role they play in police work, and some challenges that they're going to be facing. But Ken, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me today.
So Ken, you got promoted to chief October, yes?
October 8th, yes, sir.
So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So you have been with the same department all of your police career.
That is correct, 37 years.
So I have that you started at 19.
19 years old, that's correct.
So what were you doing at 19 at a police department?
Actually, at that time, state law of Texas allowed you to be a police officer at 19 years old. So I was in the academy at about 19 and a half. Graduated the academy and just had a few months before I turned 20. I did patrol, and I was a reserve officer that first 4 years, and did patrol in all operations.
So I mean, it's rare for someone, obviously, one, to have started as young and to stay with the department as long, to reach the rank that now you're the chief of police of Humble, right? And obviously, I'm sure you saw some changes along the way and great leaders that were your mentors along the way and such.
Yes.
But you finally got to a point that obviously we always talk along our career, if I was in charge, right? If I was in charge, I could do this, I could change this. And as law enforcement has changed, you now are in that role. So before we get into some of your ideas of future law enforcement stuff, to give us an idea, this actually listened to in 17 different countries that are not anywhere close to us. We're broadcasting out of Conroe, Texas, and Montgomery County in Texas. But so give us a little bit about Humble. Tell us demographics and everything that you have in your city.
Well, at Humble, we have a residential population of just under 16,000 people. The town has grown exponentially over the past years. I grew up in Humble. So in the 70s, Humble had the planning of Deerbrook Mall coming along. Right. Back in the day, it was really a couple red lights in Humble, and that was about it. It was just a normal country type town about 20 miles north of downtown Houston. Through the 80s, the mall was developed, and of course all the infrastructure around the mall began to develop. Influx of people moved into the city and the surrounding area, so Humble has grown again. And during that phase and through the 90s, the police department as well has grown. I think when I started there, I was in 1987 when I went full time. I was the 27th police officer as far as number went. Now we're up to right at 68 police officers and 100 total personnel.
So you have a mixture of commercial, residential district.
We do. We're probably more commercial than residential now. We have about 4 subdivisions. A new one's being developed right now, which will have about 300 to 400 homes in it. We do have a lot of hotel, retail. Retail is our main thing. We're also located just about 3 miles east of Houston Intercontinental Airport. So we get a lot of influx from travelers coming through the area, stop, eat at the restaurant. So our daily population goes sometimes anywhere from the 16,000 residential population to 150 to 200,000 people during the daytime.
And y'all have, I know it's not a large one, but y'all do have like a conference center. Is that in the city?
We do have the Humble Civic Center that's located on Will Clayton Parkway. And it's also a civic center and a civic arena. So they host rodeos there, and then they also do host conventions and things like that.
So tell me a little bit about y'all's divisions that you have. Obviously, you have patrol.
We do. We have patrol division and traffic division. We also have criminal investigations division, the forensics lab. We do have our own laboratory in the city of Humble. With the traffic unit specifically, they also take care of the red light photo enforcement program that's still in effect with us due to a contract that we have that's going to run out in 2024, I believe. We also operate the drone program out of there for an aerial support unit. We're located so close to Houston Intercontinental Airport, we have to stay within a certain altitude boundary due to the airport because we're on the three landing runways for the primary runways.
So now, does Humble have anywhere to grow? Is there any place for it to
We are
annex?
not.
It's
we
locked in?
have annexed pretty much everything that can be annexed. We're landlocked by Houston ETJ around us.
Okay. And so now close to y'all are on the north end of Harris County.
That is correct, yes.
So y'all border up close to us in Montgomery County, not very far down the road.
I believe at the river is where we stop, and it's just about a half mile we bump to Montgomery County.
I know there was at one point, it probably has been corrected since then of annexation, where I know that there's one point you left Humble, you entered Houston, you entered Humble, you entered Harris County, then you were back in Houston and into Montgomery County. It depended on where you were on that 59 stretch.
Correct.
As to what jurisdiction you were in.
That is correct. Now you pretty much leave Houston, enter Humble, leave Humble, enter Houston again. Houston is annexed all the way around us now.
Okay. So to talk about, well, certainly the new role that you're taking on. So tell us, where y'all are currently, where you sort of see some things that you'd like to do. I mean, now that you're in charge, right? So what do you see which is a big role, right?
It is, and it's been fun and exciting just in this first couple of months getting started. One of the things the officers have over the years always told me they wanted and over the last few years that we've gone to more of the lightweight uniforms, things like that. Facial hair is an issue with our younger officers. They want to be able to grow facial hair, the exposure of tattoos. So I've allowed some of those things on a trial basis to see how it works. So far, it's working out fine. Those are just some of the quick decisions I could make overall. We have gone back to district policing. We got away from that for a while and gone to just a radio dispatch for whatever unit was close by. We've gone back to district policing where the officers are divided into certain beats to work.
Okay.
That seems to be working extremely well. I've got a lot of citizen comments that they're seeing more police officers in their neighborhoods. Our business communities also benefit from that. They are as well seeing more officers in their business areas. We do have, like I was explaining earlier, Deerbrook Mall, which is a large shopping center. It deploys personnel for proactive patrols for burglary, motor vehicle, auto theft reduction issues and all. So those things have worked out really well.
Now, do y'all have one station or you have substation?
We have one station. We have a smaller station, and I don't even really call it a station. It's where Deerbrook Mall, there's 2 officers assigned to work out of that location. It is just a very small little storefront type station over there.
Okay, so they mainly just take care of them all. People.
That is correct, yes.
If the public were to go somewhere to file a report,
they come to one central location, the police station on Bender. Yes.
So when you switched over to the district, so how many districts did you divide into?
We are actually, it's certain times of the day. Day shift and night shift are running 4 different beats, 4 different district areas. Evening shift, with their amount of personnel on, they have divided into 2 different districts with 2 different sub-beats in each district. Just because of the call volume that they run and the way the calls process during that time of the day. So primarily it's 4 districts, but evening shift has theirs broke down to where 2 of the districts or 2 of the districts on each side operate in tandem with each other.
I mean, usually any area that has a high commercial area means that you change in population during the day.
Yes,
right?
sir, we do.
So during the day, you have this populace of workers that's coming in.
That is
You have the populace of your people visiting the stores, your consumers that are coming in. So that obviously changes, and now we're entering Christmas, right? So have you seen much activity at the mall? I mean, I wouldn't think it would be as much as it normally is at the mall. I
actually spoke to the mall manager on Monday when the holidays were over with and all. He actually said their traffic count was up equal to, if not a little more than last year.
Wow.
We would have thought the same thing, that it would have been down. Some of the stores reported sales better than last year. So we did have a large crowd that hit our shopping areas and shopping districts. With that being said, we had a slow as far as crime goes. We did catch one burglary motor vehicle suspect at Deerbrook Mall. Early Monday morning, we had a store being burglarized, and the Humboldt Police Department caught both of the suspects on that on a burglary in progress call first thing Monday morning. Other than that, it was a fairly, as far as criminal-wise goes, it was an uneventful weekend.
And usually that's where it picks up.
Usually Black Friday is just
tons of BMVs,
unbelievable. Auto thefts, BMVs, shoplifting calls, all of that, and it was relatively slow this time.
Well, good.
So that worked out really well.
I'm glad to hear people are out shopping and behaving themselves on top of it.
Obeying the law, doing so. Yes, sir.
Right. I know we always have great concerns as we get closer with robberies and things like that. People leaving the mall as people are hitting them up closer to the Christmas season, which we're only, 4 weeks away?
3 weeks away, I believe. Yeah.
Before school's out. As
Yes,
soon as
sir.
school's out, that's where we start getting everybody coming in. So talking about some issues with just that have been brought up in the news. So you said you had a drone. What do y'all use your drone for?
We use ours primarily, the focus on it is for photographing crime scene evidence for traffic fatalities, because we do have two very large roadways that cross through Humboldt. It helps us a lot to document the scene from an aerial perspective and clear the roadway as soon as possible to get the traffic mobility flowing again back to its normal standards. That's our primary function. However, we do use it for searching for felony suspects or missing people.
Now, are y'all using the drone to take measurements with, or y'all still using Total Station or scan?
We're still using Total Station at this time. We are fixing to purchase the equipment to take the measurements from the drone and be able to drop it right into a map program.
So that should make it faster to open up
That
the
should
roadways.
expedite it even better.
So have you had any of your citizens bring up concerns of the drone for privacy issues and such?
We have not had any of our citizens bring up any privacy concerns. However, the sergeant that's over that unit does watch and monitor that so that we're not flying into someone's area that deems private, that we
Right.
shouldn't be in by law or anything.
Well, I mean, it's sort of the common conversation that we have whenever we're talking about drones, facial recognition, all those things, is the balance between privacy, the citizen's concern over it, and I guess from a police standpoint, when we look at, we just don't see it, because when we look at it, it's like, well, no, we have no desire to look in your
Correct.
backyard. We have
Yes.
no desire to track someone who's not a criminal. And obviously, that's coming from a police aspect that's doing the right thing, right?
Correct. That is right.
There's certainly examples of police misconduct that we hate just as much as a regular citizen.
Absolutely, we do.
That we're seeing in the news. So certainly it brings up concerns and stuff. But we've had the same. We've had a drone program in Montgomery County for years. It's been used for. Again, looking for missing people and for crime scene and all sorts of things that some people have voiced concerns of it, but not to the level that we've seen any abuse of it. Now, you said you have a K9.
We do have a K9
So
unit.
you said it's dual purpose. So explain what that
Dual
means.
purpose is a dog, a K9, that can track a suspect if he's fleeing. Our policy specifically lays it out for a felony suspect. So somebody just committing a Class C misdemeanor theft, we're not going to break the K9 out to chase them down. It's a felony suspect only. And that's what they do. They track suspects on that to attempt to locate them. And then also the dog is a dual purpose dog. It's a narcotic dog. So it will make a detection on a narcotic hit.
And that brings up, so one of the stories that I saw this past week in the Associated Press, and again, we're talking about Seattle, and the one thing you'll notice in a lot of these stories that we'll talk about seem to be places that there's a breakdown between police and their community. Whether it's Seattle, it's Portland, it's places where we're seeing riots, where we're seeing problems. So obviously there's already issues there, right, that's leading to these type of things. But they talked about Washington State lawmakers talking about police reform and different things. But the one thing that really stood out, I've heard about many of the police reforms in general, and this was something new that I saw. This was from December 1st. It came out that they want to bar the use of police dogs. Okay.
Yes.
And that one sort of struck me as odd because, I mean, I've certainly heard about their concern over officer misconduct and use of force issues, and I guess to a point the dog's a use of force issue. But
Right.
this is the first time I've heard of that being brought up. But so to bar police dogs, and their concern on this is that they basically, I guess there's been some videos that have been released or come up where they're claiming that, of course, the person was not moving, not resisting, and getting bit or getting a dog released on them, which I think goes back to what you said, which is policy put in place, right?
That is exactly right. Having the policy in place for the conduct of the handler when to deploy the K-9 unit and overseeing the K-9 unit to make sure that doesn't happen.
I mean, what do you think the impact would be by us not being able to use any police dogs?
It would definitely be a negative impact for us in the law enforcement community. There's so many times, and Captain, you've seen it over the years too, suspects would not have been apprehended had we not had the use of a K-9 to track the suspects down.
Yeah, I mean, we had one just last week. They had, I think it was 2 pistols, an AR-15. They had meth, heroin, prescription pills. Anyway, he takes off. Dog caught him in seconds, and he's in custody. He had parole violations out for a robbery and felon possession of a weapon. So, I mean, yeah, we just last week we're using them, right?
That's exactly right.
What I'd be more concerned with some of this wording is they really did not define, as you said, dual purpose or a bite dog or a tracking dog or whatever. They just said police dogs. So now you think about police dogs being totally taken out of it that are used for narcotics, for explosions, I mean, we use them in the schools for bomb detection. Whenever
right.
you have big events, I know we've talked with the Fire Marshal's office, and whenever we have anything like the Super Bowl coming to town, they run so many explosive dogs that I'm not sure if this would go to that, but...
Like you just pointed out, they're trying to blanket the entire K-9 program, and you've got a good point there. Some of these K-9s are specifically trained for narcotic detection only, explosive detection only, and then obviously some of them are dual-purpose dogs that are trained for tracking and those purposes.
Yeah, it's so I'm not sure where that's going. The common thing that I've seen in this whole trend of reform and defunding and that type of stuff, it doesn't appear like there's a thought out process or solution. It's just, okay, we feel there's misconduct, so therefore we should take away funding from them that will tie their hands. But and a perfect example was over Thanksgiving holiday, right? I think of the New York mayor that had basically, or the New York governor, he had basically said that he did not want more than so many people meeting at Thanksgiving, right? And that wanted police to go enforce this. And if they didn't do that, I think his quote was something, well, they're not real police officers or some comment, right? And so I take that into account where we're defunding. So you've reduced the force, but the first person you turn to when you need something done is still the police
Law
agency,
enforcement.
right? And that's always been the trend, right?
That's correct.
That's the ongoing, and I agree with some of the statements they're making that police are doing too much, right? I'll
Yes.
agree with that, that when you first turn to the police for every solution for any problem that comes up, they are going to be overwhelmed. They're not going to be able to take care of all of the other issues that they should be taking care of. So under the idea of it is great, but when you don't have another plan, such as they say, well, we should have mental health officers, which we do. We have them in Harris County. We have them in Montgomery County.
Correct.
But for the most part, even those systems, they're not the first to respond. It's still patrol.
It is our line police officers that make that first initial encounter.
I mean, it's like you said, you have the districts When
Correct.
a person calls in from Humble, it's going to be the person that's a block or two away.
That is correct.
At no point, or I hope at no point, we're telling the caller we're not coming. And
We would never, yes.
You're
I agree
going to
with
have to wait until this specialized person, who wherever they may be, is going to get to you, right?
Right.
And that's sort of what this plan looks like at the rough sketch of what they're coming up with, as we defund here and we fund these other areas. Of course, the problem is there's no transition of this process.
Of how to get to this point.
Right.
Yes.
So what we've seen is the couple that stood out, and I talked about a couple weeks ago, was New Orleans, L.A., Austin, all have been cut by millions of dollars. And so it'd be the same as turning to you saying, okay, the Humble Police Department budget is cut by half, okay? And now you have to find a solution to still do your job. And the most common thing that they're doing is something I would assume you would probably do too, and that's, well, the minor calls we're not going to be able to handle.
That is exactly,
Right. You don't have another option.
You would have to take your priority calls only and
So
deal with those.
So a bunch of these agencies are now, they're not responding to burglaries, they're not responding to thefts, they're not responding to nonviolent calls, which is, as you know, a large portion of calls. So, but your citizen, that's the biggest thing happening to them, right? Their house was broken into, they've come home, they feel violated, they've lost their stuff. They would like the police to help them through this process, which we do on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And you call and they say, no, call your insurance, and I can't fathom a world that after being in law enforcement as long as we have.
That's right. Nor can I. Yes.
But that's where it's turned to, and I totally understand it. But I think it's also going to lead to a problem like we see in Chicago, where the murder rate is extreme, and we've seen homicides increasing. Matter of fact, just this past week in the Houston Chronicle, they talked about the city of Houston.
Correct.
And it was in, if I remember the dates right, in 2010, the clearance rate for homicide was 89%. The clearance rate as of this year is 46%.
That almost half
Right.
of what it is, or
and
what it was at that time.
And they did a survey of the officers in the unit. They also looked at it, and one of the conclusions that they came up with is that, for one, you have a lot of people retiring. We'll talk about that in a second. But the average time in the homicide unit now is an officer of 2.5 years. Okay, so
Yes.
you think of the veteran officers.
And you look back at when you and I first started, a homicide investigator in Houston, you and I both know they were 5-10 year senior police officers that finally made it to that. And now it's rotating out that quickly, that it's a 2.5 year seniority police officer.
Right, and it's there's a lot of training, a lot of experience that goes in with that,
Absolutely.
other than just scene.
That's exactly
you
right.
get plenty of scene experience.
Sure.
there. But in other areas, like in L.A., that they are taking homicide gang units. They're basically sort of dissolving these units. I won't say dissolve, but they're removing a lot of people from these units, and they're putting them on patrol, because you still got to have the people to respond. Right?
Absolutely.
You still got to have your patrol officers. So at the end of it, you can't expect that violent crimes is not going to go up if you don't have people solving them. Because as you know, it's not the person doing one, it's the person doing 20 robberies and 30 robberies. If you don't take them off the street, if you never solve the one, it's going to keep going.
It will continue to grow. And the less enforcement action that you're taking against the people committing aggravated robberies, you and I both know they will get more aggressive each time they begin to commit their crimes. Also, with this, the same thing with homicides. The more they know that they're not being hunted per se by an investigator that's really working on the case, following up, you're just going to aggravate that situation, and they're going to feel more free to go about doing their crimes and things.
Yeah, no, we've had that with, and I know you're in Harris County, but I'll speak to it anyway.
Yeah.
The difference between time that people get in Harris County and time that people get in Montgomery County, even though
Right.
we're bordering counties.
Correct.
We had aggravated robbery. We were working. They were going into fast food places, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, pistol whipping the clerk, taking the money, and numerous. And there was this group of, I think it was 28 people the gang out of Harris County. And when you looked at their punishment for their crimes in Harris County, they were getting deferred adjudication, they were getting probation, which only allowed them to feel free to keep this process, right?
Get right back out on the street.
So they commit them up here. I think in one case they got 40 years, another they got 60 years. I mean, word starts getting out, you don't do that here.
That's right. Yes.
And I'm not dismissing by any means the overwhelming amount of cases that Harris County has and the balance of what they are able to take to trial, what they're able to actually fill their jail with, and what they have to release. I'm not dismissing that, but it's a problem that
because there is definitely unique issues with Houston being as big as it is in Harris County. There is issues with the county jail being overwhelmed, the courts being overwhelmed, and things like that.
I mean, it's and currently, so that brings us sort of another problem, and this is it's global, is the COVID issue,
right?
And so currently, as far as jails are concerned, we're trying to minimize the amount of people that end up in there for the purpose of not spreading the virus, which has led us to taking crimes that are lesser that normally you would go to jail, like the day I interact with you, and I'm not talking about a violent crime, I'm talking about a shoplifter or something like that,
right?
Or, maybe possession of small drugs or whatever.
Right.
You're not going to jail. I'm gonna file a warrant for your arrest later. I guess at a time that it's better. I don't know really where that falls into.
Maybe when we get over the pandemic,
we just put those in. I'm not sure how that works because I guess if you filed a warrant tomorrow and they turn themselves in, you're in the same boat as if you would arrest them that night.
Right.
But either way, we're currently doing that to alleviate, because there's still the problem in the courts because it translates from the jail to the courts. I don't know in Harris County if they have started any type of jury trials.
I believe they have. I'm not 100%. I believe they have on a very limited basis.
I think the same here. I think they've had a couple.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. I just talked to a Splendora lieutenant yesterday, and he had told me, because I didn't know that Montgomery County was experiencing the same thing, but he said they're doing the same thing for the COVID reason. Get a warrant, have the people turn themselves in later, like you said, I guess at a better date or something.
Yeah, it's well, and I guess at that point they can go straight to the courts and start working out dates
working
and
the process. Yes,
but again, so we're not having trials, which delays. I mean, we have some stronger cases that we arrested or filed charges over a year ago.
Right.
You know, that they're in line, and they would have been done by now. It's
sure.
I know, it's nothing wrong with the system as far as the process of what it should do. It's just that this has thrown a wrench in moving that process along. And, what certainly concerns me with anybody being out on bond that probably is guilty, the opportunity for them to keep committing those crimes. And I remember when I worked Harris County, it seemed to be a trend that once you were arrested and you were on bond, if you could go commit as many things as possible before you actually went to trial, meaning more burglaries, more buried motor vehicles, whatever, then by the time you did get arrested, if you got caught on those, they just all lumped it into one
case. Yeah.
And it seemed to be beneficial for you or something. I don't know. That was my take on it. Right. But so talking about that as far as small arrest and different things like that. So a big surprise, at least was to me, was the legalization or the decriminalization of the meth, heroin, and cocaine in Oregon that had passed.
Right.
I remember talking to a DEA agent just out of curiosity many years ago and just saying, is there any place like in the world that like all drugs are legal? Like, I mean, like if you just wanted to go do drugs, you could go there. And he was unaware of any place at that time. I don't know how many years ago it was. I never thought it'd be here.
In our country.
That you could go, do heroin, coke, meth. Now, to clarify, they're not saying it's legal. I mean, they're not opening cocaine shops and things like next to the dispensaries, but they're basically saying if you get caught with a usable personal amount, I'm not positive what their measurement is, but they're a personal use, then you can choose between $100 fine or rehab, right? I get the concept, right? The concept is that we want people to get better and not do drugs, right?
Rehabilitate
Right.
themselves.
It's a great concept, but what I've learned in years of doing this, if someone doesn't want help,
That is exactly right. They have to want the help. And you know as well as I do, you and I being in it so long, we've seen that time and time again. Most of these people, they're not wanting the help. Even when you force them into a mandatory rehab program, they get back out. You and I have seen it year after year, they reoffend again.
it appears that at a time that we're already dealing with heroin overdose. I mean, there was not a previous time in my career that we had Narcan in the property room.
Correct.
Right, and Narcan in our cars, that we were dealing with those issues. I can't imagine why any place would make it easier to use it. You know, now I'm sort of in the middle on the fact I get that if you have a small amount, you know, in Texas, it's 2 to 10 years in the state penitentiary. Should someone go to the penitentiary for 10 years for having a small amount of coke on them? I'm not sure. That's up for debate, right?
Same here.
But,
I'm not sure on that.
I would
either.
rather a violent offender be in there
Right.
than the guy who went to some party and had some cocaine on him, right?
Right.
But I also know from experience that's not what happens. I don't know of anybody who got caught with a vial of coke and ends up in TDC for 10 years. You know,
I can't
it's
think of any myself, come
you
to
know,
think of it. But I'm like you. I think the violent offenders is who we need to have locked in the penitentiaries. The ones that are committing a robbery and shooting people, things like that, are more violent offenders. I definitely believe should be the
you know,
ones that
and I'm not dismissing that those things happen many times related
absolutely.
to people on drugs, trying to get money for drugs. Drugs are very common related to those violent
And I
acts.
don't discount the fact that it has to be addressed. Otherwise, you know, the revolving door will just keep continuing to happen with it. So it definitely has to have something to get addressed. I agree with you. Like you, I don't know anybody that got 10 years over a little vial of cocaine. But again, you know, maybe there is some areas there that we need to look at as a criminal justice system.
So, but I think the extreme that Oregon's taken has led to more use. It's going to lead, in my opinion, to bigger problems, right? Because the drug users you and I know and have seen, they don't care about the $100 fine, right?
That's exactly right.
They were spending that on the cocaine,
Right.
right? So they'll do that and
Well,
then move on to whatever.
And the deal is they're going to have to commit thefts to continue their habits of purchasing the narcotics. So it just turns into that ball that just keeps the snowball effect. That's the ones that are out here committing all the metal thefts, things like that at night, burglaries, things like that, because they're doing some of these things to commit their thefts to get the money to purchase their narcotics.
You know, and it goes back to the areas that we talk about all these things in, Seattle, Portland. I mean, it's all
Right.
Up in the same areas that are having this protest and other things. So it appears that there's not a very good working relationship between the criminal justice system and the citizens and even the elected officials in some of those areas. But bringing that same conversation sort of back to Texas, there was on one of the Dallas news stations, they were talking about Fort Worth has stopped arresting most marijuana offenders because of testing. And I know you and I have both experienced the problem with the testing. So to clarify this problem that our legislature gave us a couple years ago.
Right.
So it was not an attempt to legalize marijuana in Texas. It was an attempt to help hemp agriculture in Texas. And so the question came up of what's the difference between hemp and marijuana. Right? And they said, okay, well, it's the 3%, the THC.
THC levels 3% or more.
Right.
Yeah.
What they failed to do was they failed to actually check with the state lab to see if we could test percentage of THC. Spoiler alert, we can't.
No.
Okay. So now you've put on the books basically a law that in a sense has sort of negated the marijuana laws, because if I pull you over and you have marijuana, I have to now test this, and I don't have a state lab that's capable of testing this. So we've been in this limbo of these cases that are filed, no way to test it, and then most recently DPS saying they're not testing any of it. So now you have to go to a private lab. And the other issue with private labs, it's not just paying for a private lab. It's not just like, okay, it's $100 or $500 to test this particular case at this private lab. What goes along with that private lab is you have testimony. You have a expert lab tech who is a expert in forensic toxicology, and if it goes to trial, you now have to pay them. So this one case could cost your county or your city $5,000 in testimony and testing and everything else. I don't know what your budget is, but if you had to pay $5,000 out of your budget on every marijuana case that you came across, it would dwindle.
It would dwindle the budget quickly. Yes, there's just, like you said, the monetary value behind the forensic toxicology, like you said, and then the expert that would have to come in and testify on behalf of that would dwindle your budget quickly.
So also talking about budgets. So are y'all using body cameras?
We are.
Okay. So we just switched to them probably this past year. We started implementing ours. And one of the biggest problems we've run into, and I'd love to hear your take on it, is what are you doing for storage?
We have a lot of storage. We've actually had body cameras for several years now. We're on the co-band system, so they interlink with our vehicles. Of course, our motor vehicles all have camera systems in those as well. We've had to increase our storage a great deal. And we've got our servers all set up now to where as soon as they start getting to around 80%, we purchase more storage. But yes, it is a cost, and we've had to increase storage.
It's an expensive cost.
We've
run into that too. So. We use co-band also.
Okay.
And so we had the car videos, and those were out there for a while. But then when we add the body cams, and I'm sure that you experienced the same thing, even though it's been a couple of years, the amount doubled, if not tripled.
If not tripled, yes.
The amount of
the body cams seem like they get a lot more on them than the car cams do.
But that brings me to an article out of the New York Times that was talking about, and again, it's back to this balance of police abuse and they say that everyone should have body cams because it helps as far as reduce that basically every interaction then is recorded, and that officers wearing the devices basically are held accountable. Okay, this is the same people that are saying to defund, right? And that sort of gets back to my point, is that, okay, you want to take money away, at the same time you want to give everybody a body camera. That's your initial cost. Those are not cheap. They're about $1,000 or so a piece.
Right at, yes, sir, right at about $1,000 a piece.
And then there's the cost of storage, right?
And that's what a lot of people don't look at, is the back end side of this, the storage behind it, the maintaining of all the records. I mean, that takes IT people to handle that. So you got additional personnel. All of these things are on the back side of it.
Well, and you talk about the support personnel. It's not just as far as your people, your IT and that, but I'm sure you get many public information requests, right? Okay, so now when I've asked you before for I want all your video related to scene. Well, if it was just car video, then that's 2 or 3 videos, right? Well, now I want all your videos. Well, now that's car, that's body cams, that's this. And
of every officer that was on scene. So you go from maybe a couple cars had video on it, and you got 4 or 5 police officers that all have video. And again, it goes back to, like I was telling you about, 2/3 more tape is run on your body camera, because the officers on the scene are running that body camera the entire time they're on that scene. So you end up, with more storage on that.
Well, the other thing that the public doesn't always realize is that when we are releasing video, not just out of personal choice that we don't release something, there is redactions that have to be made, okay? And certain times, if you have the ability to make redactions, you can do so. And if you don't, you can't release it. And an example of that would be that you have a very simple traffic stop. It ended in a citation. The person wants their video from that. Well, the problem was while he was talking to that person,
That's right.
there's some other information coming across over the radio about a family violence, about something that this person has no right to access, right?
Right.
So we have to go in and we have to redact that out. We have to redact certain information that is seen on the video, license plate numbers, or anything that they do not have a right to have access to.
That's right.
Right. So goes sort of back to that privacy issue. We do respect the privacy issues because we can't release that private information to the citizen, right?
That is correct.
But how many clerks do you have to burn DVDs for you?
I have one
You have one,
that
right?
burns DVDs.
You know, and then the training, the software, if you have redaction, at ours, we don't have it. So we don't have the ability to do video as far as if there's something on there you can't have, then
You can't have the video.
it,
And
right?
we're the same way. We do not have the redaction software. So if there is something that would compromise privacy to someone else, we can't release that to the general public.
Obviously if it's
The
going
district
to,
attorney or
right,
one
for
of the
criminal
attorneys.
purposes, right.
Correct, yes.
And that's something a lot of people don't understand. We do send those requests off to the state Attorney
General's office, yes.
and they get to review it. It's not a decision that we're saying, nope, you just can't have it. We send it off. They review it. If it falls into the law in which it's under public information that we can release it, we release it. It's not a choice we're making. We get their opinion on those type of things. But
Correct. And we do the same as well, everything, as any agency in Texas does.
now, do you have you have people involved in ICAC or computer crimes?
I do. I have one officer assigned to the ICAC task force.
So now ICAC's the Internet Crimes Against Children.
Sure.
It's part of, we're part of the Houston Metro
We
ICAC.
are as well,
So
yes.
it's a large group. It used to be divided, and it's grown since then. It used to be just Houston or Dallas was the two, and it was tied to the Attorney General. And I think that has then expanded. Now we have more where, so with all the different encryptions and things that we deal with, an article that stood out that I thought was sort of interesting is from the UK. And the Facebook, I guess, is working on doing some encryption on their stuff.
I saw that same
right?
article the other day.
And apparently the UK is saying if that encryption were in place, then one of their offenders, and to give you some stats on that one, it was in Britain, and they describe him as a prolific pedophile who targeted 500 children, would not have been caught. He admitted to 96 sex abuse acts on 51 boys aged 4 to 14. They found 250,000 messages communicating with the boys on Facebook. But basically the idea of the article is that if this encryption goes through, that will not be accessible by police.
That's what I understood too. There was something in the way they were able to obtain the information. If that encryption is passed and they're allowed to do that, they were able to have cooperation with the United States authorities to grab some of these records from here. And that was my understanding, is they would no longer be able to do that.
Right, and we've always relied. Understand that Facebook, Apple, Twitter, all these places, they're private corporations. We've always had to get warrants to get access to this stuff. At no point have we ever been able to just call them up and go, "Hey, can you
send me this?
Give me
Yes.
this." Right? It's always been through legal process that we've done it. But this is actually making it to where that's not even possible. Right? We're not getting the access to it. And again, it's that I understand the balance between privacy issues, but I think in the big scheme of things, over security versus privacy, that's been a common conversation. Do you give up your privacy to have security? And I think that there's, from a civilian standpoint, I can see the concern when you look at places outside the U.S., when you look at how China has used facial recognition, whether you gain access to a store, whether you gain access to certain things based on your social level of class.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't ever imagine seeing that here, but I can see someone who sees that and views that and has concerns.
As a concern that it would come in the future here. Again, like you said, going back to on the Facebook thing, yes, and in this country, I think every state, you would have to, before you could get any record, no, I know that for a fact, before you could get any record, it's got to be reviewed by a judge who would have to issue a warrant for that. At no time, like you pointed out earlier, can we just call one of Facebook or Twitter or anybody and just say, hey, we need these records, and they just send them to us. We have to have an actual search warrant to get that.
You know, we talked about the increase in violent crime. We talked about HPD and stuff. And one of the concerns brought up is the surge in retirements. And it's certainly been a conversation in all these areas that we've talked about. And,
Right.
in Seattle and Portland, when you're legalizing drugs, when you have these violent protests, when you have a distaste for the police, when you have police officers that are going out there for the purpose to, these are the people you're trying to help, right? These are who you've put the badge on to serve your public, and you get the interpretation that they really don't want you there to begin with, right? I can't imagine being in that situation. I'm not. We're not.
No.
Here in Texas, we've, at least in our areas, we've gotten great support from our citizens and from our people. We don't see that here, but I can't imagine working at a place where the people that you're protecting really
Don't want you to be there.
Don't want you to help them.
Yes.
You know,
And I can't either. Again, like you just pointed out, for our area here, our citizens in Humble, our city council, our mayor, everybody is 100% supportive of law enforcement and the jobs that we do. So I'm like you. I couldn't picture myself working in those conditions.
But the surge in retirement, obviously, up to this point, has been met by the new surge of people wanting to be police, and I don't see that surge anymore. Right?
No,
I mean,
at all.
if you're watching the news on a regular basis, why sign up?
That's exactly right. Well, I'll give you a point. There was a time throughout my career when Humble would do a testing for one police officer. We would have over 100 candidates show up at the Civic Center to
Right.
take the test. Now we can do it at the station in our training room. We had a record turnout this last week for testing. It was 9 people.
9 whole people.
Nine
yeah.
whole people showed up. So you're right. And that trend has actually started a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's you know, and I know that brings to sort of the conversation you had as far as having beards, having tattoos.
Right.
Those have been in response to a lack of people showing up.
That is
right?
exactly right,
And basically,
yes.
can we change the image physically that normally you would have to, either one, you can't because of tattoos. You'd have to wear long sleeves all day
Right.
because of tattoos. If you decide to be a police officer, right? And so
exactly.
to remove that allows that other opportunity. Are we missing that great candidate out there that, you know, big
That
deal?
can do a wonderful job, but he's got a tattoo on his arm. I agree. If he's a professional police officer, as long as he has a tattoo that's not offensive or anything like that, I don't see a problem with it. And so far, I've done this, I guess, for about a month now. I've had no citizen
Complaints?
none at all.
Right.
In fact, every one of them I've even actually prompted and asked them about it. I said, you notice our officers, they've got facial hair now and they're showing their tattoos. Old time citizens go, well, everybody else is doing it.
Right.
Why wouldn't you do it?
It's pretty much been a change of society
Absolutely.
anyway.
It is.
Right.
So, yes.
So with that, what are your thoughts? How do we reach out to recruit when so many people are leaving? I mean, like, what would you say is a solution in Houston where you're having 2-year officers work homicides?
Right, exactly. Well, what we're currently doing with Humble Police, we are sending officers out to the academies to let them know some of the changes that we're making to better accommodate them in the job, to make a more relaxed work environment for them. And one of the other things is, like we were talking earlier, the lightweight uniforms and things like that. The police officers that are wanting to come into this now, they want a more relaxed environment. So that's what we're doing to start.
And that does it, and it's a great start to reach out to
Right.
academies and police that are already employed, But at that point, if you're in the academy, you've decided to be.
You've already decided. You're right.
know,
We at this time, we advertise, but yes, you're right. We're not doing anything to start catching them early on like high schools or things like that. That is something that has been brought to my attention, to maybe start visiting some of the schools and tell them about law enforcement, have some officers go and talk to them about that, to get them swayed into maybe looking at that as a career field.
Well, and I do know they offer some courses, and like I know that there's some high schools that actually have law enforcement
Right.
courses. There's some
Right.
that have forensic science courses. So whether it's crime scene, whether it's police officer, they have some of those available. And I do think that, but there's that gap. There's that gap between the time they graduate at 18 and 21. That I think that's certainly an area that needs to be focused on, that you don't lose them, that you don't lose someone who's had a dream of doing that, who even were to seek out that type of training and then fall off, I guess.
Well, one of the other concepts that I saw was like an internship.
Right.
A friend of mine, he's a longtime police officer as well. He was talking about that, and it really has some good merit. Let them come on board, work in positions that don't require you to be a certified police officer in the department until they can get through the academy and then transition over, to keep that interest in there.
I know that they've offered, matter of fact, I know that just here local, just speaking of local, what I know, but I'm sure it's happening all around, for crime scene investigators, I know that Blinn College offers like a 2-year forensic science, so you could basically have the training to walk in as a crime scene investigator, transitioning from your forensic classes in high school. So those are beneficial, but one of the concerns I have with that, and I know we've expressed on the show before, is there's still a lot of agencies that you have to be a cop first before you're a CSI. They won't let you
That's
be
correct.
a civilian CSI, right?
Ours is currently set up that way. However, you're exactly right. Several very good, well-reputable universities are offering forensic degrees now for that field. If you'll notice, Houston is using that Houston Forensic Center,
Right,
Forensic Science Center.
Yeah, they separated from the police department.
Correct.
And Mike Fulton, he's one of the guys over there.
Right.
He's been on the show before. But that they were also in the news last week.
Absolutely,
Right?
yes.
And-
There's
and
no quick
nothing
fix
bad
to
they
that.
were doing. They were just talking about the fact that they were responding to 4 or 5 scenes a shift. Just
Yes.
scene to scene to scene. And I know from being on scenes and processing scenes, the amount of time it takes, and you can't go scene to scene
You
to
know,
scene.
that is exactly right.
And
Things are
actually
going to get missed.
and do as well of a job
That's
as if you were
right.
doing 1 or 2
You're
scenes,
right,
right?
because you're being rushed, and you're right, you can't do as thorough of a job as you would like to do.
So, but I know they're hiring. They've put on there, and they are not police. Matter of fact, Mike, a good friend of mine, had to, if I'm correct, give up your police commission to work there.
Wow, I didn't know their criteria behind that.
That if I'm correct, he doesn't have his commission anymore, or maybe he had to have it somewhere else or whatever, maybe
Right.
as a reserve staff. But either way, they are not a police agency. You do not get commission through them. So I know they're looking, but they've gotten to the point that they're only responding to homicides.
Yes,
So
it's gotten that busy.
you're not getting robberies. You're not getting all the other things that eventually probably will be a homicide, like we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Right.
It will grow into that.
But, well, as we wrap up today, we talked about some of the challenges that just facing law enforcement around the country, local. We're going to talk next week with Stephen Phillips, chief at Montgomery County ISD, in his new position, and he's got all sorts of different challenges with the schools, and certainly I think that relationship between the officers in the schools and those children start that recruitment.
Absolutely.
Start
You're 100% right.
relationship that can build.
That's correct. The kids see those officers and they look at them as mentors, and it can grow all the way through to their career in law enforcement.
So, Ken, I appreciate you being in, and thank you for listening to Crime Scene today. If you would like to be on the show, you have a topic for the show, or you have any questions for me, and certainly if you'd like to sponsor the show, you can reach out at dan@crimescenetoday.com. We thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.